The sun rose slowly over the hills, spreading soft gold light over the Harrison mansion. The building stood like a lonely king, proud and beautiful but cold inside. Its windows were tall, its doors heavy, and its silence almost alive. For the world outside, it was a place of riches and luxury, but for those who worked inside, it was a house of quiet sorrow. Amara stepped through the grand entrance with her head slightly bowed. It was her first week working there. She had come from a small village far away, where houses were made of wood and laughter filled the air. Life had not been kind to her. Her family was poor and she had lost her mother early. But Amara had learned to smile through pain. She carried kindness in her eyes and strength in her heart. The mansion felt strange to her. Every wall was white, every room too perfect. The air smelled of polish and perfume, not of life. The other servants worked in silence, afraid of breaking the calm. The rules were simple. Do your work, speak only when spoken to, and never disturb Mr. Harrison or his son. Mr. Harrison was a name whispered with both fear and respect. A billionaire known for his steel heart, his sharp tongue, and his loneliness. His wife had died years ago, and since then the mansion had turned into a museum of memories. The man hardly spoke, rarely smiled, and never allowed strangers near his family. But there was something more, a mystery Amara could feel, but not see. Sometimes she heard soft footsteps in the west hallway, though no one was supposed to go there. Sometimes at night she heard faint music coming from behind a locked door. When she asked the cook about it, the woman only shook her head and said quietly, "Don't go near the west wing, Amara. Some doors in this house are better left closed." Still, curiosity grew in her heart like a small flame. One morning, while dusting the tall mirrors in the corridor, she noticed the door to the west wing slightly open. Her heart beat faster. The rule was clear. No one entered without permission. But something gentle, almost like a whisper, pulled her closer. She walked quietly through the door. The hallway beyond was dim, with curtains drawn tight. The air smelled different, like old books, flowers, and sadness. She moved slowly, her soft shoes making no sound on the carpet. Then she stopped. From behind a half-open door she heard breathing, slow, calm, and young. Then a voice. "Who's there?" Amara froze. It was a boy's voice, clear but unsure, like someone who lived in the dark for too long. She stepped inside, her hands trembling slightly. What she saw made her heart stop. A young boy sat by the window, the morning light touching his pale face. His eyes were gray, not the gray of clouds, but the gray of emptiness. He had a small walking cane beside him and a book resting on his lap. His hands moved gently over the page, feeling the raised dots with quiet focus. Amara realized the truth. He was blind. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice soft like the wind. "I didn't mean to disturb you." The boy tilted his head, listening carefully to her voice. "It's fine," he said softly. "You must be the new maid." "I'm Daniel." Amara nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Yes, I'm Amara." He smiled faintly, though his eyes remained empty. "You don't have to whisper," he said. "I may not see, but I can hear you perfectly." Something inside Amara warmed. There was kindness in his tone, but also loneliness. The room around him was filled with books, but no life. No laughter, no friends, no light. As she looked at him sitting there alone in the silence, she felt her heart twist. The mansion might have been rich with gold and art, but here was something it had lost. Love. Amara didn't know then that meeting Daniel would change both their lives forever. She only knew that for the first time, she wanted to break the silence of that grand, empty house. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice told her, this boy needed her far more than anyone else in that mansion ever would. After that first meeting, Amara could not stop thinking about the boy in the West Wing. Daniel, the billionaire's blind son. He was only 17, yet he lived like an old man trapped in a quiet room. Every morning she saw the same window open, the same pale face turned toward the light. as if he was trying to see the world he could no longer touch. Amara began to notice the small details of his life. The books with raised dots stacked neatly on his desk, the soft sound of music playing from an old radio, the careful steps he took whenever he moved around. He lived in silence, surrounded by beauty he could not see. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves, Amara found Daniel sitting with his head slightly bowed. His fingers were moving over the pages of a braille book, but his lips were trembling. She could feel the sadness in the air. "Are you all right, Daniel?" she asked gently. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I was reading a story about a boy who could see the stars. He said they were beautiful." "I wonder what they look like." Amara sat quietly beside him. "They look like small candles," she said softly. "They shine in the sky and sometimes they blink like they're alive." Daniel smiled faintly. "Candles in the sky? I like that." That was the first time Amara saw a real smile on his face. It was small, fragile, but beautiful. After that day, she began to visit him more often. At first, only for a few minutes during her breaks, then for longer. She would describe things to him. The color of the morning, the way the trees danced in the wind, the shape of the clouds above the garden. Daniel would listen with quiet wonder. His world began to grow, not through his eyes, but through her words. "What color is your dress today?" he once asked. Amara laughed softly. "It's blue, like the ocean I've never seen." "Then I'll imagine you surrounded by waves," he said. Their conversations were simple, yet they carried a strange magic. Amara, who had lived her life in poverty, found peace in talking to the billionaire's son. And Daniel, who had everything except sight, found light in her voice. But the mansion was full of eyes and ears. Servants began to whisper, "The maid talks too much to the boy. She's forgetting her place." Amara didn't care. She only cared about Daniel. One evening, she brought him a rose from the garden. "Here," she said, placing it in his hands. He touched the petals slowly. "It feels soft," he said. "Is it red?" "Yes," Amara whispered. "Red like warmth, like love." He smiled again, and for a moment the sadness faded. But not everyone was happy about their friendship. The head butler, Mr. Cole, saw them talking one morning and frowned. "Miss Amara," he said coldly, "you are here to clean, not to entertain." Amara lowered her head. "Yes, sir." Daniel's face tightened. "Leave her alone, Mr. Cole. She's my friend." The butler's expression hardened. "Friends are not part of your schedule, Master Daniel. Your father expects discipline." When he left, silence filled the room again. Daniel sighed. "He thinks I'm weak. My father, too. They think blindness means uselessness." Amara's heart ached. "You are not useless, Daniel. You just see the world differently." He turned toward her voice, his gray eyes glimmering with emotion. "Then promise me something," he said softly. "Promise you'll never stop talking to me. Your words are my light." Amara felt tears rise in her eyes, but she smiled instead. "I promise," she whispered. From that day, she became his eyes. She described everything she saw, the rain, the sunlight, the way the world changed outside the window, and slowly, Daniel began to laugh again, but deep in her heart, Amara knew that happiness in the mansion was fragile. Because in that grand house of gold, love was a forbidden luxury, and soon someone would try to take it away. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion that once felt lifeless slowly began to change. It was not the sound of laughter in the hallways or music in the rooms. It was something gentler, something only two hearts could feel. Every morning, when Amara finished her chores, she would quietly walk to the west wing, carrying a small tray with tea or books. Daniel always waited near the window, his head tilted toward the sunlight. He could not see the light, but he said he could feel it. "Good morning, Amara," he would say, his voice calm and warm. "Good morning, Daniel," she would reply, smiling even though he couldn't see her. Their friendship had become a secret part of the mansion's days. The other servants no longer spoke to her much. They watched her with silent judgment, but Amara didn't mind. Every time Daniel smiled, she felt her heart glow. One afternoon, as rain began to fall outside, Amara sat beside him and described the world beyond the window. "The sky is gray today," she said softly. "The rain is washing everything clean. The flowers are bending, but they'll stand again when it stops." Daniel listened closely. "It sounds peaceful," he said. "I love the sound of rain. It feels like the world is breathing." He turned his face toward her and added quietly, "When you describe things, Amara, I can almost see them. You make the world real for me." Her chest tightened with emotion. "You already see more than most people, Daniel," she whispered. "You see with your heart." A silence followed, soft and comfortable. The rain continued to fall, tapping gently on the glass. For a moment it felt like the world outside didn't exist, only the two of them did. As days passed, Daniel began to share more about his life. He told her how his mother used to sing him lullabies before he lost his sight. He told her how his father had changed after her death, how the man who once laughed and held him now only spoke in cold tones. "I think he's ashamed of me," Daniel said one evening. "He never says it, but I feel it. He hides me away as if my blindness is something ugly." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "No, Daniel. He's not ashamed of you. He's lost. He doesn't know how to love without pain. He doesn't see that you're still his son, still the same boy." Daniel smiled sadly. "Maybe, but he never talks to me anymore. He only talks to his business partners in his mirror." Amara wanted to hug him, to tell him he was not alone, but she stayed still, only letting her voice carry the comfort she felt. "You're not invisible, Daniel." "Not to me." He turned toward her voice. "And you're not invisible either, Amara," he said softly. "You think I don't know how people treat you here, but I do. You walk quietly, you lower your eyes, but your heart speaks louder than anyone else's. You are the only real person in this house." Her lips trembled. No one had ever said something so kind to her. For a moment she forgot she was a maid and he was the billionaire's son. They were just two souls, broken in different ways but healing together. Sometimes they played small games. She would describe something in the room and he would guess what it was. Or she would read to him slowly, and he would repeat the words until they became poetry in the air. "Your voice," Daniel once said, "is the only color I know." Those words stayed with her long after she left his room. At night, when she lay in her small servant's bed, she would think of Daniel's smile, his quiet strength, and how his blindness didn't make him weak. It made him gentle, kind and human in a world too proud to care. But deep in her heart, Amara feared something she didn't want to name. The mansion had its own rules, and in this house of wealth and pride, love, any kind of love, was a dangerous thing. She didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was clear to her heart: she could no longer imagine her days without Daniel's voice. The rain had stopped that night, but the sky still carried a dull gray sadness. The mansion slept in silence, yet Amara couldn't close her eyes. She lay awake in her small room, thinking of Daniel's words, of his loneliness, of the emptiness in his father's heart. The house was full of light during the day, but Amara often felt that darkness lived inside its walls. There were too many locked doors, too many secrets, and one secret was calling to her now. The mystery behind Mr. Harrison's study, the one room no servant was allowed to enter. She rose quietly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, and walked through the empty corridor. The chandeliers above her glowed faintly and her heart beat fast. The door to the study stood tall and polished, like a guardian of memories. For a moment she hesitated. Then she turned the handle. It wasn't locked. The room was large and filled with old books, paintings, and files. But what caught her attention was a small wooden drawer in the corner desk. It looked out of place, dusty and untouched. Slowly she opened it. Inside lay a small music box, silver, delicate, and shaped like a heart. Amara gently turned the key. A soft melody began to play, sad and beautiful. The tune felt alive, like it carried someone's memories. Amara stood still, her chest tightening. She could almost imagine a woman's laughter in the air, a child clapping along. Then a deep voice spoke behind her. "What are you doing here?" Amara gasped and turned. Mr. Harrison stood at the door, his eyes sharp as steel. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I didn't mean to." He walked closer, his face pale in the faint light. "That music box," he said quietly, "belonged to Daniel's mother. She used to play it for him every night before she died." His voice was trembling, not with anger, but something heavier. Pain. Amara held the box gently. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel would love to hear it again, but Mr. Harrison shook his head quickly. "No," he said firmly. "He doesn't need reminders of the past. It will only hurt him." She wanted to speak, to tell him that Daniel already lived with pain, that silence hurt him more than memories ever could. But she stayed quiet. Mr. Harrison looked at her closely. "You've been spending time with my son," he said. "I know everything that happens in this house." Amara lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir. I only talk to him. He's lonely." "Lonely?" Mr. Harrison repeated bitterly. "You think you can fix that with words? He needs strength, not pity." His tone grew colder, but Amara didn't move. Her heart ached for the man in front of her. She could see the grief behind his anger, the way he carried guilt like a shadow. "Sir," she said softly, "he doesn't need pity. He needs love. He needs someone to listen." Her words hung in the air. For a second, the great Mr. Harrison looked smaller, older, almost fragile. Then he turned away. "You don't understand. Leave." Amara placed the music box back and bowed her head. "Good night, sir." She walked out quietly, her heart heavy. That night she couldn't sleep. The melody of the music box played in her mind again and again. She realized something painful. Mr. Harrison wasn't cruel. He was broken. He had lost the one person who could love both him and Daniel without judgment. And now he was trying to hide from that loss by burying it under money and silence. The next morning, Amara went to Daniel's room. He was sitting by the window listening to the birds. "You're quiet today," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "I just learned something sad, Daniel." "What is it?" She hesitated, then said gently, "Your father misses your mother, but he doesn't know how to show it." Daniel's face turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "He never talks about her." "I know," she whispered, "but he remembers. I saw it in his eyes." Daniel was silent for a long time. Then very softly he said, "Maybe one day he'll remember me too." Those words broke Amara's heart. As she stood beside him, watching the sunlight touch his face, she made a silent promise to help Daniel feel the warmth that his father had forgotten how to give. Because somewhere deep inside this cold, golden mansion, both father and son were blind, one by eyes, and the other by grief. And Amara, the black maid, was the only one who could help them see again. That evening, dark clouds gathered over the mansion. The wind began to howl through the trees and the sky turned a deep gray. It was the kind of night that carried both beauty and sadness, when the world felt heavy with memories. Amara stood by the window in the servants' room, watching the first drops of rain fall. She thought about Daniel sitting alone in his quiet room. The last words he spoke echoed in her heart. "Maybe one day he'll remember me too." Something inside her ached deeply. She couldn't bear the thought of him alone while the storm raged outside, so wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders, she walked through the empty corridors toward the west wing. The mansion was silent except for the thunder outside. When she entered Daniel's room, she found him sitting near the open window, his hand stretched out to feel the rain. "Daniel," she said softly, "you'll catch a cold." He smiled faintly. "I like the rain. It sounds alive. It feels honest." Amara came closer and closed the window halfway. The sound of raindrops filled the room like soft music. She sat down beside him and watched his face, peaceful yet full of longing. "The rain reminds me of my mother," Daniel said quietly. She used to sing when it rained. I can't remember her face anymore. Only her voice. Amara's throat tightened. She remembered the music box she had seen in his father's study, the one that belonged to Daniel's mother. She had kept it hidden, afraid of what might happen if Mr. Harrison found out. But tonight felt different. Tonight Daniel needed that sound more than anything. "Wait here," she said gently and hurried to her small room. From under her blanket she pulled out the silver music box. Its surface glowed faintly even in the dim light. When she returned, Daniel turned his head. "Amara, what's that sound?" Amara smiled softly. "Something that once belonged to your mother." She placed the box on the table and turned the key. A soft melody began to fill the room. The same tune that had played years ago in his childhood. The lullaby of love and comfort. Daniel froze. His lips parted as if he could feel her presence again. "That song," he whispered. "I know it. She used to play it when I couldn't sleep." Tears slipped down his cheeks. He reached toward the music box, touching it gently like it was something sacred. Amara watched silently, her heart breaking and healing all at once. "She loved you, Daniel," Amara whispered, "more than anything in this world, and I think she'd be proud of you." He smiled weakly through his tears. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Amara said. "You carry her kindness." The storm grew stronger outside, thunder echoing through the sky, but inside that room, everything felt calm. The soft melody wrapped around them like a warm blanket. After a while, Daniel said quietly, "Amara, sometimes I feel like I can see again, not with my eyes, but through the way you describe things. Through your kindness." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Then maybe we both see the world the same way, not with sight, but with heart." At that moment, the door opened suddenly. Mr. Harrison stood there, his expression hard, his eyes burning with anger. "Amara," he thundered, "what are you doing in here?" And that music, but then he stopped. The melody caught him, pulling him backward in time. His wife's face flashed before his eyes, her laughter, her touch, her song. And then he looked at Daniel, his son, sitting there with tears on his face and peace in his expression. For the first time in years, something inside the billionaire broke. He walked slowly toward his son, his voice trembling. "Daniel." Daniel turned his head. "Father?" The man knelt beside him, his hand shaking as it touched his son's shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have never shut you away. I couldn't bear the pain." Daniel smiled faintly. "I missed you, Father." Mr. Harrison pulled him into a hug, the first in years, and Amara stood silently, her heart full. Outside, the storm continued, but inside, something far stronger was happening. Forgiveness. As the music box played its final note, the mansion that had once been silent began to breathe again, and Amara, standing in the corner with tears streaming down her face, realized she had just witnessed something truly rare. A father and son finding each other again, guided by love, by music, and by the kindness of a simple maid who refused to look away. The morning after the storm, the mansion felt different. The air that once carried only silence now held the soft echo of something new. Peace. The servants whispered to each other in surprise, for they had seen something they never thought possible. The cold, distant Mr. Harrison embracing his son. Amara woke up with a strange calm in her heart. She walked through the halls, her steps slow, her thoughts deep. For the first time since she arrived, she could feel the warmth of the house, like it had finally begun to breathe again. When she entered Daniel's room, she found him sitting near the window as usual, his hands folded over his cane, but there was something different in his smile. It was lighter, freer. "Good morning, Amara," he said cheerfully. "Good morning," she replied, smiling back. "You sound happy today." "I am," Daniel said. "Father came to see me again this morning. He stayed for breakfast. He even asked me to tell him about Mother." Amara's heart swelled with joy. That's wonderful, Daniel. He's changing. Daniel nodded, his blind eyes glimmering with emotion. I think the music helped him remember. He told me he had forgotten how her laughter sounded, but when he heard that melody again, it felt like she was in the room with us. Amara felt her throat tighten. She never really left, Daniel. She lives inside both of you. Daniel turned toward her, voice smiling softly. You always know what to say. Later that day, as Amara was dusting the main hall, she heard footsteps behind her. When she turned, she was startled to see Mr. Harrison standing there. He wasn't wearing his usual expression of stone. His face looked tired but gentle. Amara, he said, his tone quieter than she had ever heard. I need a word with you. Her heart raced. Yes, sir. He gestured for her to sit. I owe you an apology, he began slowly. I judged you without understanding what you brought into this house. I thought silence could protect me from pain, but it only made my son and me strangers. Amara shook her head humbly. You don't need to apologize, sir. You loved your wife deeply. You were just lost in the memories. He looked down at his hands. You remind me of her, he said after a moment. She had the same courage, the same warmth. You saw my son when I could not. You gave him hope again. Amara's eyes filled with tears. All I did was talk to him, sir. He just needed someone to listen. Mr. Harrison gave a faint smile, the first real smile she had ever seen on his face. And yet that simple act did more than all the doctors and teachers I hired. He paused, his voice trembling. You've given me back my son. For a moment the room was silent, filled only with the ticking of the grand clock. Then Mr. Harrison said softly, I want to make things right. Daniel deserves to see the world, to feel it even if he can't see it with his eyes. I've kept him locked away for too long. Amara nodded, her voice gentle. He's ready, sir. He's brave enough to face anything. The billionaire looked at her thoughtfully. Would you help me, Amara? Would you help him learn to live outside these walls? Her heart skipped a beat. I would be honored, sir. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Amara and Daniel walked together in the garden for the first time. The wind carried the sweet smell of wet earth. Daniel lifted his face toward the sky, his lips curling into a smile. I can feel the sun, he whispered. Yes, Amara said softly. It's welcoming you. Behind them, Mr. Harrison stood at the window watching. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. Not from sorrow, but from gratitude. He whispered to himself, Thank you, my son. And thank you, Amara. That night the mansion glowed with a quiet light. The music box rested on Daniel's table, still and silent, but its melody lingered in the hearts of everyone it had touched. The house that had once been a prison of grief had become a home again, full of love, laughter, and second chances, and Amara, the maid who had entered as a stranger, was now the light that guided two broken souls back to each other. Weeks passed after that storm, and life inside the grand Harrison mansion slowly began to bloom again. The cold halls that once echoed with silence were now alive with voices, laughter, and music. Daniel was no longer the quiet boy sitting by the window. Every morning Amara would take him out to the gardens where the scent of roses filled the air. She would describe the colors of the flowers to him, the bright red roses, the golden sunflowers, and the soft pink tulips. Daniel listened with his head tilted, his lips curved into a smile as if he could see it all through her words. Sometimes he would laugh and say, Your voice paints pictures better than any artist, Amara, and she would laugh softly, replying, Then I'll keep painting them for you, Daniel. Mr. Harrison watched them often from a distance. His heart, once buried under years of grief, was now open again. He began to join them during their walks. He would guide Daniel's steps or tell him stories about his mother, stories he had been too broken to share before. Daniel loved those moments the most. Every word his father spoke filled the empty spaces in his heart. One afternoon, Daniel asked, Father, will you take me to the sea someday? Mother told me it sounds like a song that never ends. Mr. Harrison's eyes softened. Yes, my boy. We'll go together. The sea waits for you. Amara stood behind them, her eyes wet with quiet tears. She knew what she was witnessing, not just a father and son, but two souls learning to live again. Days turned into months, and Daniel grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. He learned to play the piano again. The first song he played was the one from the music box, the melody his mother had loved. His fingers trembled at first, but Amara sat beside him, whispering softly, "Just feel it, Daniel. Don't think, just feel." The melody floated through the mansion like a prayer. It reached every corner, touched every heart. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "She would be proud." From that day onward, Daniel played often, sometimes for his father, sometimes just for himself. Each note carried hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Mr. Harrison called Amara into his study. He looked older but peaceful, his voice gentle. "Amara," he said, "I once believed money could fix anything. But you showed me that only love can heal what's truly broken." She looked down shyly. "I only did what anyone would have done, sir." He shook his head. "No, you did what no one else could. You gave my son back his light, and you gave me back my heart." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "You both gave me something too, a family I never had." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Mr. Harrison smiled warmly. "You will never be a servant in this house again, Amara. You're part of this family now." Her tears fell freely, but they were tears of joy. She whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you for believing in me." Later that night, Amara sat in the garden looking up at the stars. Daniel came to sit beside her, guided by his cane. "Amara," he said quietly, "do you ever wonder what people look like when they smile?" She smiled softly. "Yes, but I think you already know." He turned toward her, voice, his face calm. "When you talk, I can feel your smile. It makes the world brighter." Amara blinked away her tears. "And when you play your music, Daniel, it feels like the world is healing." The wind brushed past them gently, carrying the faint melody of the music box from Daniel's room. In that moment, it was clear this story wasn't about a maid or a billionaire's blind son. It was about three hearts who had lost their light and found it again in each other. The mansion that had once been silent now stood as a home filled with laughter, music, and love. And every night when Daniel's fingers danced on the piano keys, Amara would close her eyes and listen, not to the sound of the music, but to the sound of a miracle, because love had done what sight never could. It had shown them the way home.